call the meeting to order. If you would all be so kind as to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone, both in person and those who are watching from the comfort of their homes. Tonight, we're pleased to recognize 26 outstanding Parkway teachers who have been selected by their peers as their school's Teacher of the Year. Their dedication to students, community spirit, and personal commitment to excellence has earned them this honor. A special thank you to the Parkway Alumni Association for sponsoring the Teacher of the Year program. The Alumni Association provides monetary awards and crystal apples for the elementary, middle, and high school Teachers of the Year recipients. I would like to welcome Dr. Chelsea Watson, Deputy Superintendent, to introduce our 2021 Teachers of the Year.
Thank you. Good. I guess I can take my mask off. Am I okay to take my mask off? Hear me better? Good evening, President Todd, Vice President Hopper, members of the board, Dr. Marty, Mrs. Stover. It has been said that some teachers tell, some teachers explain, superior teachers demonstrate, and great teachers inspire. Well, I must tell you that I have the honor of presenting greatness to you this evening. Maya Angelou once said, when you learn, teach, when you get, give. Teachers, we know our teachers give so much of themselves all of the time, every day. We know that they influence students on an ongoing basis, and we don't always know the impact that a teacher has on our kids. So, teachers, those of you watching, thank you. Thank you so much for all that you do each and every day. And we also know that this year has been a little different, and we appreciate the ongoing efforts that you have made to help us be successful. So at this time, I'd like to recognize each Teacher of the Year, starting with elementary school and early childhood. Barrett's Elementary School, Mandy Williams. She teaches first grade. Belle Reed Elementary School is Erin Kern. She teaches third grade, and she is our elementary teacher of the year, elementary school teacher of the year. Carmen Trails, Cindy Redmond. She teaches second grade. Claymont, Julie Boatner, she is the library media specialist. Craig Elementary School, Jennifer Mendine, she teaches kindergarten. Early childhood, Lindsay Cotman, and Green Trails, Sharon Tupper, she teaches second grade. I think my fingers skipped one. Lindsay Cotman, early childhood. At Henry Elementary School, Erin Valroy, and she teaches fifth grade. Mason Highcroft Ridge, Madison Gurley, and she teaches kindergarten. Emily Reichart, Mason Ridge, and she teaches second grade. Maggie Beckman at McKelvey, she is the instructional coach. At Piermont, we have Holly Haneke, and she is also the library media specialist. At Riverbend, we have Pam Petrosino, and she teaches first grade. At Ross Elementary School, we have Hannah Roth, and she teaches kindergarten. At Shenandoah Valley, we have Leah Westover, and she teaches ESOL. At Wren Hollow, we have Sandra Schuler, and she teaches kindergarten. At Central Middle, we have Bill Coates, and he teaches social studies. At Northeast Middle School, we have Brandon Allen, and he teaches music, vocal music. And Lee is also our middle school teacher of the year. Moving to high school at Central High, we have Kara Deffenbaugh, and she teaches art. At Fern Ridge, we have Tanya Silvers, and she is a special educator. At North High, we have Clint Johnson, and he teaches art. And at South High, we have Mike Hackmeister, and he teaches speech and debate, and he is the Parkway High School Teacher of the Year and the Parkway School District Teacher. Nope, I got that wrong. Amy Gossett is the teacher at West High. She teaches theater, and Amy is the High School Teacher of the Year and the Parkway School District Teacher of the Year. So again, congratulations to all of our teachers, and thank you for representing your schools, and thank you for representing the Parkway School District.
Thank you, Dr. Watson. And thanks to all of our teachers. You do some amazing work, and especially this year under some really extenuating circumstances. I saw a couple of names up there I recognize, and it's impressive to me that someone can earn a Teacher of the Year not even being in the building, but just engaging their students in such a way to promote and provide such success. So we're very proud of the work that all of you have done this year. So congratulations to you all, and thanks obviously to the members of the Teacher of the Year Selection Committee, which was chaired by Daniel Stiltz from Highcroft Ridge. Although I know they enjoy reading the nominations, it's not an easy task to narrow down to the elementary, middle, and high school and district teachers of the year. Each teacher will receive a gift and a certificate. They have been sent to their schools, so they'll get them shortly. And obviously, thanks again to our teachers, their families, administrators for joining us here in person and virtually on this special recognition. We're honored to honor you. So next up, we have additions, corrections, and modifications to the agenda. Those include 6.01, addendum to agenda item 10.06, approval of personnel items. 6.02, addition of agenda item 10.31, approval of 6-month extension of employee assistance program contract. And 6.03, addition to agenda item 10.32, approval of PowerPlex event space license agreement for May 2021 graduations. Next up, we have citizen comments. During this time, we provide an opportunity for citizen comment in effort to maintain an open and respectful dialogue with our community. The public comment session is not the appropriate forum for addressing individually identifiable student and/or personnel matters. Therefore, due to privacy laws protecting students and employees, comments about these matters should not include personally identifiable information about particular students or employees. Members of the public, staff, and students are encouraged to utilize established policies and procedures for offering suggestions or addressing concerns and complaints prior to bringing the issue before the board. Please be mindful that the meetings of the board, including your statements at the podium, are broadcast and that you are responsible for any public comments you make. In lieu of a public statement, you may choose to submit your comments to the board in writing. Also, due to time constraints and the need to complete our primary responsibilities of tonight's meeting agenda, we cannot respond during the meeting, so you will receive a response from us in writing. We are always available to have an open dialogue outside of our meetings and can be reached by email or phone using the contact information on the Parkway website. Tonight we have, I believe we have 3 speakers, and each of them will have 2 minutes, after which we will move on to the next speaker. So the first one I'd like to call up is Kemba Metropoulos.
Hello, Dr. Marty, Mr. Todd, Mrs. Hopper, Mrs. Stover, and members of the Board of Education and Parkway Community. On behalf of the Students for Progressive Change, I, as their sponsor, am reading this letter because they want to address the issue of SROs in our schools and their impact on our student population. SROs feed Black and brown students into the school-to-prison pipeline. Black and brown students are funneled from being disciplined in our schools into the criminal justice system. When kids are criminalized for behaviors that could be redirected rather than met with strict discipline within the school system or even redirected, you're ignoring that these students are only kids who truly benefit from restorative practices, redirection, and not to make them criminals. SRO's numbers rose in America after the tragedy of Columbine. While the sentiment was to protect kids, statistically, the presence of SROs does not make the school a safer environment. We can see that from the tragedy at Parkland, whose resource officers fled from the scene instead of protecting the students and staff in the building. They could not and did not prevent Parkland from happening, and many students and teachers died thinking they had protection. Depending on SROs for school safety is a failed approach. We need to educate kids, not incarcerate them. The whole point of being kids and going to school is to learn and grow. Sometimes we have to make mistakes in order to truly learn and truly grow. By putting more SROs in schools, especially armed ones, we are setting up kids to be punished, not educated. Ultimately, this police presence makes us feel unsafe, and it does not protect us. Students should not feel like baseball players worried about getting 3 strikes and then they're out. However, instead of sending kids to the dugout, schools with SROs send kids to prison. Baseball players can get over a slump at bat. Black and brown kids in Missouri, under these laws, have a much harder time getting over that same slump with a discipline record that follows them. Imagine if they are followed and funneled through the prison system. Schools that have more police presence have both higher suspension and arrest rates. Black students are more likely to be arrested in schools with a police presence. Parkway's goal is not to feed the school-to-prison pipeline. Parkway strives to have a diverse and inclusive environment. Parkway strives to have schools of character. Parkway can't reach our mission and vision if our students of color are not safe under the current presence of cops. They do not make us safer because they are armed. Rather than adding more SROs and maintaining an ineffective and false sense of security, we need to invest in our schools and in our community. Invest in full-time mental health professionals. Invest in our counseling and guidance department. Invest in Parkway students. When reviewing SROs in school, we must remember who we're really investing in. If we choose to invest in SROs, what messages are we sending to our Black and brown students? Because ultimately, if we continue to invest in SROs, we are not truly investing in our students. With this, we urge you not to have police departments and SROs sitting on the program review planning team. If the police department is on the review committee, the committee is biased, leaning towards protecting SROs and not our student body. Therefore, the legitimacy and integrity of this task force is compromised. Would you ask the fox to guard the hen house? We need Parkway to invest in the community by security measures that don't involve armed cops in schools while expanding mental health professionals in schools and truly protecting our student body. Sincerely, your Parkway students.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Nicole Greer.
Take my mask off because I don't think I can speak as clearly as she did with it on. Good evening, members of the Parkway School District Board of Education. My name is Nicole Greer, and I am a Parkway resident and member of the Creve Coeur City Council. I stand here today as one of the more than 450 Parkway community members, including parents, students, alumni, current and former staff members, administrators, and elected officials like myself, who signed an open letter in the summer of last year requesting that the Parkway School District evaluate the impact of school resource officers on school safety and the well-being of Black and brown students. To begin with, I would like to recognize and thank the Board of Education for committing last fall to evaluating SRO activities in the district as part of a broader program review of security measures within the district. As our group said at the time, the board's willingness to listen to the Parkway community is a sign of leadership and open-mindedness. I also want to express my appreciation for the board's subsequent commitment in late October 2020 to conduct the SRO program review using a racial equity lens. Your responsiveness to this ongoing grassroots effort is appreciated and should be celebrated. 2 weeks ago, we were informed by Mr. Paul Tandy, who is the Chief Communications and Emergency Management Officer, that he would be co-facilitating the SRO program review with Dr. Nathan Tyson, who is Parkway's Director of Data Management and Research. We appreciate the time and attention that they intend to dedicate to this effort. Mr. Tandy also told us that the beginning of the SRO program review is contingent upon approval, whether tonight or at another board of education.
I'm sorry, Ms. Greer, we're going to need to move on to the next speaker, please. If you'd like to submit the rest of your comments in writing, we'd be happy to take those.
Did I read on the website that we get 3 minutes, because you said 2 tonight?
Yeah, I did say 2 tonight. We give up to 3 minutes depending on the number of speakers, but it's generally about 2.
But there's only 3 speakers, and I still only get 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Jacob Lyonfields.
Okay, I can read where Nicole left off, and then I can try and go quickly through my statement. I believe she was going to read the 4 calls to action of our grassroots initiative, which is number 1, that the program review team's evaluation plan move forward only if the following conditions are met: that the evaluation is done independently from school resource officers or officers from the local police departments that employ them being on the program review planning team; that the team overseeing the review explains publicly not only whether they intend to use a racial equity lens during the program evaluation, but more specifically how they are going to adopt such a racial equity lens. Number 3, that the team engages the public for input and feedback and offers the public multiple public-facing updates. And finally, that the SRO activities are analyzed using data-driven and evidence-based research rather than solely relying on qualitative surveys and other tools. With the minute I have left, I wanted to highlight that in addition to the importance being placed on having an independent program review planning team, it's also really important that we look at the guiding questions in the materials that were published earlier this week by Mr. Tandy for public consumption, and looking at those guiding questions as things to be evaluated tonight and not necessarily approved tonight. Just as an example, in the mission, vision, and purpose guiding questions slide, there's currently a question that reads, how do SROs support the district's mission and vision? Something that I was going to speak to at greater length was the importance of looking at not only the positive impacts of SRO activities, but also the neutral and negative ones, as well as whether monies invested in SRO activities could be better spent elsewhere. So to reframe the question in that particular slide, it would be maybe saying, on balance, do SROs support the district's mission and vision, or in what ways do SROs support and also not support the district's mission and vision? I have the rest of those suggested revisions, which
Okay.
are not meant to be comprehensive, written down, and I printed off
Okay,
copies for the board, so maybe I could just pass
that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, thank you all very much. Next up on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I may have a motion and a second to approve the agenda for the regular meeting of the Board of Education scheduled for March 10th, 2021.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next regular board meeting will take place on Wednesday, April 14th, 2021, beginning at 7 p.m. The organizational meeting will take place prior to the regular meeting at 6:30 p.m. Next up is board liaison reports. Start down there at the end. Matt?
Yeah, my own little table down here. I'll just share that I was part of this, since the last board meeting on the SRO Security Committee. I look forward to discussion tonight.
Last Friday, I, along with several other board members and administrators from Parkway, Rockwood, and Pattonville, attended a joint legislative meeting where we met with some of our state and national level legislators. It's always a really interesting meeting where we get to hear about all of the things that are coming up on the state and national level. I would like to make a note that most of the state level legislators who attended this meeting are the ones who tend to be really strong supporters of public education. I don't know how many of you are following some of the bills that are going through in Missouri, but public education is having a rough time in our legislature. And there was only one representative who is advancing some of these bills at this meeting. I'll have to say I was disappointed in that, because I consider one of my biggest jobs as an elected official to be a listener and to hear concerns from constituents. And this was a virtual chance for them to do that, and I was disappointed that some of them weren't there. The thing that I want to emphasize is that a lot of the things that are being done in the name of school choice, districts like Parkway offer a lot of choice to their students. We've got Spark, we've got early college, we've got personalized learning coming up. We put in place probably what was one of the best virtual schooling options, making sure that we were serving all of our students. And I just hope that the parents in this district will continue to speak up and let legislators know how they feel about their district, the things that the district is doing that are helping their kids, because I think it's really important for all of us to have a voice in this. Even if you know that your legislator may not be supporting your public schools, they still need to hear from you because you're their constituent. It's a commitment I make every day as a board member, and I would hope that our legislators would make it too. The other thing that I did is I had another great trip to the Parkway Food Pantry yesterday. I just want to speak out to this community. I did a little experiment over the past couple of weeks. I saw that the food pantry needed some specific items for their upcoming collection. And I decided, I did this just as a parent, not as a board member. I decided to see how much food I could collect just based on social media posts. I posted on my personal page and in several community groups I'm involved in, and this community stepped up. My dining room was full of food, and Director Hopper had to help me deliver the food yesterday because it wouldn't all fit in my car. We had 2 carloads of food along with a cash donation that went to the food pantry. So I also want people to know the power there is in individuals. Reach out to your community when you know somebody in the district needs something, because this community steps up. And I was so proud to be part of Parkway as I watched my dining room fill up with food over the past couple of weeks. It was really cool. I just wanted to share that.
And Pam, we want to thank you for your leadership and taking the initiative to do this. How wonderful that is to get people involved and have the kind of response that you did. It's incredible. Thank you so much. And we had the Board of Education Recognition Week, and
We received some very wonderful thank you notes from SAT and Dr. Marty, and we want to thank you for that on behalf of the board. They were very, very nice, showed a lot of appreciation for board members and recognition of what board members do for Parkway, for children as well. And Christy and I will be attending the Equity Task Force tomorrow night and continuing the process of coming up with recommendations.
Sam stole my update, so.
You stole mine last time.
There you go, that's fair, that's fair. To you.
Thank you. I also attended the legislative breakfast virtual legislative breakfast that Pam mentioned, and I sort of intended to say something along the lines of what Pam said, although I don't think I could possibly say it as eloquently and poignantly as Ms. Hill, but she's 100% right. I think the leaders that are pushing some of these school choice bills, some of them were there, but they all seemed to have a meeting to get to right when we got to the question and answer period portion of the meeting. But for those that are sort of taking notes here, these things are all called school choice, and it's something that a lot of people casually hear and say, oh, school choice, that sounds good, why not? And I just think it's incumbent upon all of us that care about public education to learn how these measures will really affect these institutions and come to our own decisions, and for all of us to be advocates against this legislation. But Pam, that was exceptionally well said, appreciated. I also took part in Parkway Trivia Night. The team included Pam and Christy, and if you think the board members get special treatment, you should attend Trivia Night, because we don't. And finally, since we are honoring the Teachers of the Year tonight, I just wanted to mention two of the teachers that were honored. I'm fortunate enough that both of my children, we switched schools at semester, and both of my children were educated by Teachers of the Year this year. My daughter's kindergarten teacher, Miss Manzini's at Craig, had the task, she succeeded in helping my daughter start kindergarten virtually, which seems impossible, but she did an excellent job. And my son's teacher in 3rd grade at Bellerive, Ms. Kern, among her many accomplishments, somehow convinced my son to stop wearing a hat to school. So she absolutely earned that honor. So hats off to all the teachers, and especially those two.
On the matter, I too attended the legislative breakfast, and I think my takeaway from that, when I asked the question of how can we address the issues that are at hand that are affecting public education, what do we need to do to convince legislators not to move these forward or to get enough votes? And I think my big takeaways are that our community needs to get educated on what's going on out there. I encourage you to go to the Missouri School Board Association website. I encourage you to go to the Missouri State website, go to the U.S. Senate website for Missouri on both the House of Representatives and the Senate side, and get yourself educated on these bills. They directly affect everybody in this community. It will affect our teachers, the school board, administrators, where your children may or may not go to school, what services they may or may not receive. Everybody needs to become educated on that. So that is my one big message to our community tonight. Please get educated on this, get involved, and write to your representatives and senators on that topic. What we learned is that because of term limits in legislation these days, we have a lot of freshmen that are not familiar with the process. They're not familiar with what's out there, and they have to get educated as well. And they have very quick turnovers. Sometimes they have 24 hours to get up to speed on a bill that is going to be heard. And so they don't know what is going on, and they need to get educated on that very quickly. And then they're also bypassing the normal procedures and going into either emerging or emergency processes instead of going through the traditional ways of introducing bills and getting them heard. So this is appalling, and it would be nice if we saw more of our legislators having their children in public schools. A lot of the legislators, if you look them up and see who they are, they do not send their kids to public schools. So there you go. The other thing that I want to address with regard to the Special School District Governing Council meeting met on March 1st, and we had an election. And for the Board of Education. Subdistrict 4 has, we have 3 new board members on the special school district. In Subdistrict 4, which serves Ferguson, Florissant, Pattonville, and Riverview Gardens, serving a 1-year term to fill an open seat will be Mr. Scott Moeller, who happens to be a Parkway North High School teacher. He will represent that district. In Subdistrict 5, we have Brentwood, Kirkwood, Lindbergh, Maplewood, Riverview, Maplewood, Richmond Heights, Valley Park, and Webster Groves. Dr. Meredith Byers will be the SSD, the Special School District Board member representing that subdistrict. And the board member representing Subdistrict 6 for Clayton, Normandy, Rittner, and University City will be Ms. Tiffany Hudson. So we welcome all of these. I have to say to all of the candidates who went to file for candidacy for the special school district this year were very highly qualified, very impressive. It was very difficult to make a decision. Just some, stood out. And I think there are strong points here that they all are parents with special school district experience, and some of them also have teaching and medical backgrounds as well, and strong advocates within Autism Speaks organization, et cetera. So I feel very, very good about our election this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. I have several comments, but first I'd like to apologize to Mr. Lionfelds and Ms. Greer. Ms. Greer, you were correct. The website does state that you should have had 3 minutes. I believe Mrs. Metropolis had her 3 minutes only because we didn't get the clock started in time, but she did finish the end of her communication. I'm happy to get both of, if you have separate statements, I'm happy to have both of those entered into the minutes for tonight's meeting. So again, I apologize. I was a little confused between some of the changes we've made between virtual and in-person meetings. So thank you again. I wanted to also, Sam mentioned the board recognition. We also got some wonderful messages from a number of students in different schools, and we really appreciate those. Not that we don't appreciate the ones from SAT, but the ones that, you guys just didn't color any pictures for us. So if you could do that next time, that'd step up your game. But we really do appreciate kids taking the time to recognize us. I also wanted to mention, in addition to Pam and Debbie's support of the food pantry, we've really had some amazing groups and individuals step up across the community these last, really the last year, but especially the last 6 months. We really had a great influx of food and donations to help support the needs of so many in our community. So that's been great. On our consent agenda items tonight, we have several gifts from the community. One is to the food pantry, but we also have gifts to the Central High football program, to Claymont Elementary School. And despite the fact that we're in this pandemic together and things are difficult for a lot of people, our community seems to keep giving of their time, talent, and resources, and so we really appreciate that. Just yesterday, I think we had our biannual religious leaders meeting, and we had a number of religious leaders from congregations across the Parkway footprint, and really had a great time hearing from some of those folks what's going on in their communities, and an opportunity to thank them for the support they give their congregation, that many of whom have students right here in our schools. So we thank them for their participation. And that's all I've got. You have anything to?
Just a few items, and board members, thank you for your support of the food pantry, your advocacy of what's going on in Jefferson City, and I think really obviously the board is really engaged in both community and state activities. So thank you. Dr. Watson honored our Teachers of the Year. I just want to thank the teachers at North High School and the community who's undergoing a bit of a return to virtual education because of a large number of students who either quarantined or some positive situations. And I just want to thank, it's gone quite well, the return to distant learning, virtual education, but most importantly, the staff has just stepped up again, and the administration and the students there. So we'll be returning to in person right after spring break, and in the meantime, we want to make sure everything is safe there, and certainly we anticipated potentially these things happening, and we regret it's happened, but at least, again, people are working very, very hard. I do want to just say that as we plan for next year, there's been a lot of questions we received. You know, we do certainly intend next year and are planning to be in session 5 days, return to a calendar that is a normal calendar. And so we get a lot of questions, you know, well, are we going back? Yes, that's certainly our intent. Our intent is to be back, hopefully after vaccines. But, you know, there still may be some safety precautions, some protocols in place, but our intent certainly is to have a calendar that is a 5-day-a-week in-person calendar. We are, of course, planning to offer virtual education to those families that still desire that. As we talked about that being kind of part of our choices, and we're planning that with Dr. Becker and others, Dr. Bogus and others that are working on that. I also just want to say that Paul Tandy attended a meeting today. We are trying our best to get our educators all school staff vaccinated. So we're advocating with the governor, with the county health department to get vaccines in place. We find that a lot of our staff are doing so independently. So we did a survey, and we're finding that a lot of people certainly are working hard to get themselves vaccinated, even though it may mean they have to travel some distance or, you know, find other ways. But we're trying to do our best to get our adults certainly vaccinated. And then finally, we started outdoor camp last week. It's not the normal 3-day venture where do we go? Not Trout Lodge, but we're at Babbler for a 1-day, and I understand it's going very well. Dr. Watson was there today, and a couple of principals. I know some of the board members are planning to go. I'm planning to go in April, but we understand that it's going very well. We really do appreciate community education and Mike Seppi for offering this opportunity so our 6th graders could have this opportunity, the traditional 6th grade camp, which is such a tradition here in Parkway. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. We have no upcoming subcommittee meetings to report, so we'll move on to our consent agenda. We've all had an opportunity to review that, so may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented in the March 10th, 2021 board materials.
Second?
Is there anything to be pulled to action or closed? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. We have no action items tonight, but we do have a policy review. So I'd like to welcome Paul Tandy, Chief Communications and Emergency Management Officer, to join us to review that.
We'll do the policy review first. Well, good evening, President Todd, members of the board. The policy review is on the civility policy. As you know, we've had that policy for several years. And as part of the ongoing review process, our legal counsel advised to add the sentence that you see in your materials at the end, basically stating and clarifying that the policy is not intended to prohibit freedom of expression. So the legal counsel had recommended that. Dr. Matheson and I looked at it and thought it made good sense, and so that's what the proposal is for you tonight.
Anyone have any?
Do you have to use this policy much? Or can you speak to
I can
broadly when we have?
I can speak to it. Oftentimes, and Dr. Watson and I get involved sometime where at building levels where we've had a situation, perhaps a parent or a visitor who has not met our expectations, and we've had to certainly send a letter or have certainly some communication. And so we probably this school year, I would say, given we haven't been in person a lot, it's still not been, but probably in an annual year, I would say maybe a half dozen times. Dr. Watson, would you agree that we have to remind people of our civility policy? We put that in place certainly to just understand that we have expectations of our own staff, but also of our visitors, and their expectations of proper respect for educators and for administrators and certainly office staff and the people they come in contact with.
I asked the same question, and not that I'm aware of, unless someone else, Dr. Marty, I think it's just part of a ongoing policy review, and they recommended it. I'm not aware of anything
No, I
that
don't
brought
think,
it up.
yeah, I think Ms. Hesse, I think, just is really conscious of the fact that we have to certainly be aware of, making everything very much in line with constitutional rights of individual rights, so I think that's what this is about.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you for that, Paul. But don't go far. We have no official reports tonight, so moving on to our work session. We have a preliminary work session on the Security Department and School Resource Officer Program Evaluation.
All right, well, good evening again. And can you hear me with my mask on? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I'll leave it on. We'll have Dr. Tyson here with me as well, and he'll have a few remarks as well. So he and I will be working with you on this program review. Just as a reminder, we have several program reviews every year. We've done it for many years as part of our process of continuous improvement. And most of the time, you see this with our curricular areas, math curriculum review or so forth. But we also do these for our support programs and departments. So you've had Will Rosa up here with the Transportation Department in the past, or Health Services, or Food Services. And we had a program review in the queue for the Security Department for this year. And then based on the feedback that you received in the fall, Dr. Marty had the idea of maybe adding the SRO program in with security, since they're so interrelated. So that's how we're here tonight with both security and SRO. So we're eager to get into the program review. And as is customary, the first meeting is a work session with you where we get feedback from you on the areas that you want us to look into and make sure that the study is covering the things that you want us to cover, asking the questions that you want us to ask. And as is customary, we typically get a group of people together ahead of time and draft something for you so you can have something to start with for the conversation, and that's what we're doing tonight. And we'll talk about the timeline. I put the slide, I moved it down to the end so we can talk about the timeline. But next slide, please. Before we get into the potential topics and guiding questions. Oh, I do the slide, don't I? Sorry, I forgot. So I thought I'd spend just a couple of minutes, because a lot of folks don't know probably much about our security department, and maybe not so much about SROs either. But on the left, a photo on the left is our security department, and on the right is Officer White, who was here. He gets.
He's still.
Oh, there he is. I know he gets tired of us showing that picture, I think. It's just such a good picture, but, and I think Officer White's one of our longest tenured SROs. So that's the folks that we're going to be doing the review on. Next slide, Paul. The blocks in yellow are the people that we're talking about, the department. I have the pleasure of working with both the communications department and the security department. And I'm going to talk a little bit more here in just the next slide about what the roles and responsibilities are of both the security department and the SROs. In the lower right is the box for the SROs. You notice that their line in this chart is dotted line, so it's an administrative. They don't report to the high school, middle school principals, but they have a liaison administrative relationship with them. They actually still are employees of their police departments, and their direct supervisors are employees of the police department, typically a sergeant. And we have 10 SROs, one at each of the middle and high schools. Okay, just as a review, some of the responsibilities of the security department is mainly to provide a 24/7 district-wide watch. We have people on duty, or at least one person, at 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning. So someone's always on duty and available to respond to any situation that may occur. To conduct emergency notifications and response, to make sure the right people are informed no matter what time of day or when it is of something that may need to be addressed. Also do physical security of our schools and buildings with the roving patrols and so forth, typically after hours, but they also do them during the day. We do have monitoring of various alarm systems, for example, our motion alarms, other alarms that they monitor for us. They monitor our safety tip line. Oh, I don't guess it's on there. They monitor our security cameras, all of our internal and external security cameras. But we do have a safety tip line that they monitor 24/7. And I can tell you that, it happens occasionally where we'll get a tip in the middle of the night about something that needs to be addressed, whether it's involving a student or a threat or what. And they act on it, and they don't let that tip go until they've passed it on to someone who's going to address it. So that's really a nice thing. They also do the standard things the security departments do. They issue ID badges and proximity cards. They do the hard keys and work with other departments on the door locks, the prox readers and so forth that are all around the district. They assist with safety drills and training, particularly with our visitor management system that we've began a few years ago. They are the lead on that, along with the IT department. And then just liaison role with both the first responders in the community and with our SROs. So that's the main responsibilities of the security department. Now, SROs, I went back and looked. We began, we had high school SROs first in 1998. So that was actually a year before Columbine. And then a few years later, middle schools were added. Today, we have licensed officers in all 10 of our middle and high schools, and broken down, as you see there, based upon the location and the jurisdictions of the various middle and high schools. So we have the majority, or the Chesterfield Police Department provides the most at 4, St. Louis County 3, and then Manchester 2, and Creve Coeur 1. Creve Coeur is Northeast Middle. And again, like I said earlier, the SROs are not Parkway employees, but we do pay a portion of their salaries for the time that they're in our buildings. We do have I believe, an excellent relationship with our police departments in that we collaborate on the selection of our SROs. So, for example, we're getting 2 new ones for next year, one at West High and one at Northeast Middle. Both of those principals have been telling me that, they're involved in the interview panels and guiding questions for the candidates, and we really appreciate that. I think that's part of the program's success, is being able to be involved in who is going to be in those roles. They're intended to be a problem-solving resource in the schools in general, help us implement safety and security policies. They do assist with drills and training. The state of Missouri requires that our intruder drill be conducted with a licensed police officer. And then any just sort of situation or an individual that might pose a threat to student or staff safety. Obviously, they provide a liaison role with our security department and other local law enforcement agencies. They are not involved in enforcing student discipline policy, and that's a really important point. And one of the things that we really make very clear when we work with our SROs and our principals, they have a good understanding that they don't enforce student discipline. That's the job of the administrators. And ideally, if you have a good program, they are integrated within the school problem-solving team to help all students be safe. So tonight, that's a little bit about the 2 programs. And tonight, what we'd like to do now is, the purpose is to seek your input and guidance on the main topics and guiding questions that'll drive the program about. And there we go. And as was mentioned earlier, we do have a planning team. That is typical. Dr. Tyson is the lead on our program reviews around across the district, and so what I think I'll do is let him explain a little bit about the purpose of the planning team, because I think it's important that we all understand what is the role of the planning team, and why do we get them together. And you can see on the slide kind of who we have on the current planning team, and I'm going to turn that over then to Dr. Tyson to explain a little bit more.
Thanks. Yeah. Good evening. Very happy to be with you all this evening. And really, like Paul said, I just want to talk a little bit about kind of the process and how we go ahead and address issues of making sure there's no bias, that we have no leading questions, or really that we have an objective evaluation. So just want to go through kind of a few of the points here, and then turn it back over to Paul, and he'll continue with the work session. But, kind of from the research/study angle, the first thing I would say is, yes, this program planning team is important. And really, this team was carefully selected so that it would be a diverse and representative team. But at the same time, we had to make sure that the size was manageable, you know, because you only want to have so many people. Sometimes if you get too many people, it's really hard to move the work forward. I'd also say that generally we do include stakeholders and also those heavily invested in the outcomes of this program evaluation or any program evaluation. Since those people, the members on the program committee, planning committee, are really the ones who are going to be most affected by any of the recommendations that we work, or that we come up with. So we want to have those people kind of along along with us for the journey, so that they're able to kind of see, have input along the way, and so that they're really able to buy into the recommendations that come at the end. So like if we have a math program review, we'll include math teachers. If we have a health services program review, we'll include the nurses. Same thing like if we do athletic program, we'll have activity director, athletic directors involved. So a couple of other ways that we're planning and hoping to allow more and all voices to be heard during this particular review is we want to have focus groups that we can conduct to allow these voices to be heard. We'll go ahead and have transcripts and or summaries of the focus groups, and those will be included in the appendix in the final board report. You know, I know that could potentially be a concern is, you know, is there some manipulation of the data? Obviously, we don't do that, but just to make sure that everyone is clear, we include in the appendices sort of the unadulterated versions of all of these data sources. So focus groups will be like that, and then also surveys as well. So we're planning to put surveys out to parents, to staff, to students, and again, we'll do the same thing with the appendix where we include just the results as they are before anyone does anything with them, and they'll be included there so that, you know, people who really want to take a deep dive into this program, you know, can go in and see exactly how people responded to our surveys and also in the focus groups. Also, really, there's just going to be a small subsection of people who even put the survey items together, the survey questions together, and the focus group prompts. So it'll really just be Paul, myself, and maybe one or two others, and that's really it. So I see, you know, one of the big parts of my job is to make sure that, like, when we get those surveys out, before we get them out, that I'm able to kind of go through and make sure that we don't have any leading or biased questions, so that we can have a really objective study. You know, that's really important with any of the surveys that we put out in the district, and so that's definitely something that we would keep on the forefront of our minds as we move forward. I would also say that, you know, program leaders, regardless of the program evaluation that's happening, they're always encouraged to include positive findings and negative findings. That's super important. And not only that, if we didn't have the negative findings, we wouldn't be able to have good recommendations, right? Like, it's really those negative findings that are kind of the material for the final recommendations that arise. So we really do want it to be both positive and negative. You know, I've been around doing this long enough that, you know, I've seen dog and pony shows, and then I've also seen it on the other side where it was just like too negative. And really what we're hoping to strike, especially with this evaluation, is the positive pieces, but also the negative pieces, so that we can have ultimately good recommendations that will allow for, you know, continued or improved effectiveness in the SRO program as well as in our security program. So last thing I wanted to say before turning it back over to Paul, ultimately the Board of Education, that's why we're here with the preliminary conversation. We started doing these preliminary conversations years ago, and I think it's always been good. I mean, it's been super helpful to have you all give us, you know, some feedback, but ultimately the board has the final say on all of this. So Paul's going to go ahead and he's just going to continue and let you know what the planning team came up with. But really, you know, it's up to the board. If you all see something that needs to be changed, included, excluded, you know, totally revamped, you know, that's why we do the preliminary conversation with you all. This review has not begun yet, so nothing has happened except for what you see here that Paul has in front of you and the meeting with the initial group of stakeholders to come up with the the main topics and the guiding question areas. So, thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Tyson. So he facilitated the meeting and used the process that he normally uses to help us identify. I will say, talk to Dr. Marty, I hadn't been through that with him, and I thought it was a good process. We had a couple of board members on there. I think the way we went about it was really thought-provoking. And so I'd like to share with you what we've put together as some possible topics and guiding questions. So the 5 overarching topics that we have proposed are: 1, mission, vision, purpose; 2, student and community connections; 3, of course, you got to have safety; and then training and professional development is key, we think; and then finally, the people that we have. And so what I'd like to do, those are the 5 main topics that we're recommending, and then and they're purposefully broad so that you can go a number of directions. And then I'll share with you a few of the guiding questions that we came up with that would help further guide the study. And I appreciate the comment on the question earlier about this one. And absolutely, that's a great suggestion. And that's actually intended of how these questions are intended to be, is just very open so that we can go in a number of directions depending on what you find. But on mission and vision, how do the SROs in our security department support the mission and vision? To what extent? And what are the primary roles and expectations in particular of an SRO as it relates to the mission vision of the district? In terms of student connections and community connections, how do students, teachers, staff, administrators, and parents view Parkway Security Department and the SRO programs? And as has been suggested, obviously we do want to ask, how do students of color, particularly black and brown students, feel about their SRO in their school and the level of safety it provides or doesn't provide? How do we communicate the role of the SRO and the security personnel, as well as their impact, positive or negative? In safety, at the end of the day, what impact do SROs and security personnel have on the physical, emotional, and online safety of students and staff? What other research or information exists about the impact SROs have in keeping students and staff safe? And how do what we have align, the security program and our SRO, align with current best practices in school safety and security? Training and professional development. What training are SROs and security personnel required to receive, and then what other ongoing training? Because we know there's both, but what is that? And then what additional training, or PD, if any, should we think that they should receive? And to what extent do SROs already participate or not in the ongoing PD at their school? As you know, Dr. Marty, we added language into the contracts the last time around on this piece because we wanted to get them more integrated into certain PD that was going on in the buildings. And then on the flip side, how can SROs or security personnel share expertise and training that they have? So for example, in our drills and safety programs and protocol. And then finally, personnel. So under personnel, what are the requirements to be selected as an SRO or a Parkway security officer? What is the oversight? And how is feedback gathered and communicated regarding each SRO, or I guess also the security officer's performance? And finally, what is an appropriate and equitable staffing model to support these programs in support of Parkway's mission and vision? I mean, that's a lot to cover, but under each of those, you could go in a lot of different directions, as Nathan pointed out in our meeting. So it's there's a lot of detail that can fall underneath those. I won't go into too much in detail, but this is a typical timeline. We either come to you in the fall and then come back in the spring with the report, or we do the spring and come back in the fall. So this one will be the spring-fall version, but we do intend, our goal is to come back to you in October. At that October 13th meeting with the final report, we'd conduct the survey of the study over the basically spring and summer, early summer months, and then Nathan and I will develop the findings and start writing the report. Dr. Marty did remind me, I added the superintendent's action team piece in there because I forgot to put that in there, because we actually do come to SAT first, and we present the findings and discuss possible recommendations with the superintendent's action team. So that's a primary role that they also filter, that they provide. And then we bring it back to the board in the fall. So that's the proposal. What questions or suggestions or comments do you have for either Dr. Tyson or I?
Well, first off, thank you very much for the presentation and the time you took. I know Dr. Tyson put a lot of work into the preliminary planning exercise that Nat and I were part of that group that participated in that, so thank you very much. I have one question right off the bat that just came up on your community relations, student connections slide. You listed several different things. One of the things that I see SROs do, and they get support through the local police departments as well, but we have a lot of community-facing time with SROs at community events and sporting events at the high schools. Is there some element where you're talking about doing some of these focus groups that might include some of those patrons, the parents that wouldn't normally, interact with an SRO in a school building, but certainly do at some of those events?
I would love to be able to do that. I'll probably defer to Nathan on how that might handle, or how that might work. And just to clarify too, a lot of those bigger events in the evenings, we might have the SRO there, but we also might have other security personnel that we've paid
Right.
on an hourly basis because we need more people. So not all of those people there would be SROs, but I would love to have those kind of voices, because sometimes those are hard to identify. How do you find those? So.
Yeah, I would just agree with that, and I would say too, like, what's a lot of fun sometimes is, you pick a group, like with the focus group of either students, parents, or staff, and then, we just do random selections. A lot of times too, we can also even pinpoint the group. So let's say we want African-American students, in the North area, and then we can do a random pick and pull in students that way. But there's a lot of different ways we can handle it, and obviously we'd be open to your feedback, how you think would be great. And actually, Jeff, just what you said about using that venue as a way to kind of find people and pick people, I think is great. So I think that's a super recommendation, and I definitely think we should follow through with something like that.
Okay, good. And then the obvious question, based on some of the communications that we've received today and several of our speakers tonight, the validity of having the actual security personnel, whether it's SRO or our security personnel, in the review of the programs themselves, do you see that as being detrimental to the process? Do you see it, kind of talk us through that.
Yeah, so, I think it's definitely worthy of a bigger conversation. If I were just asked for my initial thoughts, I think a lot of it depends on the goal of the program evaluation. So this particular goal, as I've understood it, is we were going to handle it like we would handle any program evaluation, one that we did for the math department or one that we did for the food services. If we're doing that, and I think you guys know we have a board policy all about program evaluation. So from that angle, if that's the approach we're taking, that we're handling it like any other program area, then yeah, it would really be all about how do we achieve, kind of do a study, perform a study that allows us to, at the end, have recommendations that will allow for continued or improved effectiveness. Okay, so that's that. Now I will say too, and obviously Dr. Marty, if you have comments, please, but just ask for my initial response. We do have a piece also in the policy that talks about, if we need to do a different type of review. I would say, like, for example, if there are some heavier questions about the existence of a program at all, then I think that would fall outside of this type of a program evaluation. And so I think there just needs to be a lot more conversation about this particular question. But if we're going to do it like we've done other ones, it's always about how do we improve the program, not whether or not, you know, it stays in existence. For example, I'm in the Student Services Department in Parkway. If we were going to decide, well, do we really need a Student Services Department at all? Like, I shouldn't be part of that you know what I'm saying? I shouldn't, right? So it's kind of the same thing, and that's how I view it. So as long as we're doing the traditional program review that we have outlined in our board policy, then I would say the bottom line is we want to get to recommendations to improve the program. And that's how we've been approaching it so far.
Yeah, and I think that's our intent with this is to evaluate the program by definition. And if you come back to us in October and you say the program's terrible, we need to shut it down, then, you know, then we have those conversations. If you think, you know, if there's recommendations to be made to change it in some way or you know, continue improving it, then obviously we cross that bridge.
And I have seen, since I've been here, there are times when we'll have the program review report, and there have been some things identified that we want to study further, and the board has directed the administration to do, you know, some sort of a additional, you know, task force or something. That happens, you know, I think with the mental health task force, for example. So.
I have a couple of questions. You mentioned that focus group surveys. To me, something that I'm not quite seeing here, although it seems that it could fall under the safety portion, what research or information exists about the impact they have. Does something like this include an examination of existing data? Because Ms. Metropolis brings up, you know, do we have evidence that the interactions between Parkway students and SROs is leading to the school-to-prison pipeline? And right now, I don't see that question being addressed in this. And to me, that's an important piece of this. That's something that I'd like to see if that would be a part of an evaluation of this type.
So a review of secondary research that's already out there, absolutely, should be a part of it. And I would have Nathan help guide that. And you'll notice on the second bullet, what research or information already exists.
Right.
That's part of that. In fact, we've already had a conversation about who could we reach out to that could provide us with, you know, unbiased, you know, studies. You have to be careful, obviously, because, you know, Parkway, our community is, you know, sort of a certain type and makeup. You know, we have to try to look at comparing similar programs and areas, but that is definitely part of it because there's a fair amount already out there, but we also do need to not discount also the perceptions in our own community too. So it's a little bit of both.
And I think it's important to make sure we're looking at apples and apples, and we're not taking that data from across the country or one particular region and just assuming that's the way it is in our school district. It would be good if we, you know, if we based our data on some of these focus groups and maybe come up with the same type of survey so that we could get the same exact sample of data.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on doing the local perspective. I think it's really important. I mean, we are our own community in Parkway, and I really do think it's important that we at least do our best to uncover data relative to Parkway. Although I also think that it is a good idea to look at other research that's already out there. Regarding the school to prison pipeline question, I would say, and actually this is actually some of the best recommendations that come at the end of a review like this is, okay, we haven't been doing a good job on collecting data on this particular topic. Let's get some systems in place to do that. I will say generally, we have discipline data. Generally, we have climate school data, you know, climate survey data. So there are some sort of general type of data that we could look at, but does it get right at the whole thing of the SROs and the security guards and their impact on students? I don't think so, but could we come up with a way to better track some of that data? I think we sure could, and I think that would be an excellent sort. Obviously, I don't want to plant recommendations right now because we haven't done it yet, but that sounds like it could be potentially a great recommendation that could come out.
And that's exactly what I was referring to, was examining Parkway data. I wasn't bringing up something comparative with another area. I do have one more question. When you discuss the role of the planning team, say, when you use the example of math review, everyone you mentioned who were involved in those reviews are Parkway staff members. SROs are different. And so while people like to consider them as part of our staff or part of our district, they're not. They are an outside agency that we contract with. And so the question is, when looking at this timeline, are we in the position where that maybe, since it sounds like there's only a couple of people who are going to be involved in doing the evaluation, this initial meeting when preliminary findings are discussed, do the SROs need to be involved in that meeting? Could it be that it's later on in the recommendation process?
Yeah, Dr. Marty and I talked about that today. I mean, given the sensitivities of this one, we can take it any direction you want to go. The main purpose of it was this first part, to be honest. And as Nathan mentioned earlier, it's nice to have them involved because at the end of the day, we're going to have some recommendations for their improvement. You like to have them at least, aware and somewhat involved. But yeah, that's why I had updated that slide, because the superintendent's action team is really the group that's going to look at it and discuss the possible so-whats, the possible recommendations.
But real quick, just in terms of the planning team, I mean, just so you're aware, I know Paul didn't list every person on the team. Way more Parkway people than outside agency people, just so you're aware. I mean, it's mostly, at least a majority, a strong majority.
And it's not unusual to have other people. I mean, one of the things Nathan suggested at one point was, well, could we find like an independent school safety expert who we could just have on the planning team? And we just couldn't find one that we thought would work and would join the team. But no, I think that's a fair. Dr. Marty, you want to?
Well, and I would say that Ezra was probably the only actual SRO, and then we had the gentleman, the other police personnel were captains, I think, and other higher.
Well, we invited the county and Chesterfield because they provide the most SROs. That was how that,
And I will say that one of the things that when Paul contacted them, they want to be a participant because they want to make sure the program is being effective. They're into it the same way. They want to see what the strengths and weaknesses are. So they're willing participants, and as Paul knows, we have a wonderful relationship with them. As Paul mentioned, as we're selecting new SROs at a couple of schools, we're participating. Our principals are participating. We don't get handed SROs. We are part of the process. So again, I would say that their interest in this is, one, to make sure that they're doing the best job they can in selection and development and all the work that they want to put into this program, because they have a vested interest. They're part of the community, and they want to be involved in the evaluation. So they were very willing. I think, Paul, right, when you invited them, they wanted to be at the table to participate and helpful.
Yep.
And I think it's fine that they were at the table for developing the first draft of questions, and then we get to give feedback on that and decide if these are the questions that we think are the right ones. But I think Pam's point is well taken, and the point of community members we heard from, that anything that either does or presents the illusion of an opportunity to alter results because of who gets to be in the room and who doesn't. And I'm not criticizing or trying to comment on the character of either of you or any of the other people involved, please. But, I mean, I think the reason we're adding SROs to this is because it came to us from community, and it came to us from people who have reason, broadly, to be concerned about the interactions of law enforcement with members of our community. So I think that I'm glad that the departments want the feedback, and I'm glad, our SRO personnel are interested in it, and I believe that. And I think everything we can do to make the process one that our community trusts and has faith in, I think just serves us well collectively as a community.
We can.
Can I add another idea to that? I attended a Missouri School Board Association conference workshop on this very topic about SROs and their role, because there's a more global discussion that's taking place nationally even about this topic. And one of the things that I would be interested in looking at, and this stuck out at me when somebody mentioned it, and it's part of the evaluation that you're talking about here, but I think we could take it a little step further. But what was interesting to me is that these individuals said that when you, and I think maybe if you could consider adding students to your panel, if at all possible. And the reason why I say that, and then I'll get to some of the other discussion here too, is because this person said that when you have an SRO standing at the front entrance of a school at the start of the day, which many do, that could be a trigger for some of our students who have experienced trauma in their family from police brutality issues, and that is not a way to have a child's day start. So I think that we just need to be aware that that is out. I had never even thought about that until that person, because I don't walk in those shoes, you know. And so I think we have to be very sensitive to all of our students. And so that's why I wonder if, and with one of the guiding questions is you bring into that the question about how Black students, I forget what the guiding question is, my thing just failed here, but what their thoughts are. But I would ask, how do all students feel about the SRO at their building? And I would also, I'll take a different view on the SROs not being included in this evaluation from the standpoint that they're, in my view, are different from a regular contract service because they're in our buildings. They're interacting with our students. They're interacting with our staff. They are building relationships with our students. Some are building very positive relationships. And we can take a positive role of a wonderful SRO to help students who have ill feelings about it and show work in a positive way by our police officers, for lack of a better word, and how they can be a positive influence in our society as opposed to a negative influence. So these feelings go very deep, and I think we need to be very sensitive to that, but I think we need to look at it from all of our populations. I mean, we even have our Asian community now who are at, concerned with what's happening within the whole matter there, which we don't need to go into. But all that to say, I think we need to look at this with all of our students in mind, understanding that there will be nuances and sensitivities within each different population of cohort students that we serve here. The other part, I know you have student services on here, but I also wonder if we don't need a representative from the special school district directly to be here for students who are of emotional disability, physical disability, and what are they feeling about, having the SSD, because their students are here, their students that are being served by SSD are in our schools interacting with the SRO, and might that bring a different light into the picture as well? The other question I have is, I don't want us to discount our VIC students. I know you talk about, you just mentioned Parkway North, area, but I think it's important that we recognize that we have students that come here from St. Louis City, and I don't want to, have that population dismissed either in this. And then I also would ask why. You talk about SROs at the middle school and high school, but at one time we had SROs in the elementary schools, and I didn't see that being brought up in this presentation?
So we've never had contracted SROs, I mean, since I've been here in the elementary schools. What we do have is Chesterfield and Baldwin provide, I mean, for lack of a better term, an ESRO that covers the territory, comes in and visits and checks in. The schools like to call them their SRO, but they're really, they're not a contracted SRO.
So
And
what
that-
does the what does, I don't understand what all that means. So who are, but they're police officers from,
Right, from those departments that part of their job is that they go by and visit the schools in their jurisdiction. Not all of them do that, but Baldwin and Chesterfield do.
And can I just say, that came about after Parkland, the chiefs of police came to us and volunteered. They thought this was something they wanted to participate in, so we welcomed it. Certainly at that time, there was a lot of concern about school safety. So I think Paul and I were at River Bend the other day for an activity, and the police officer, who is a Chesterfield police officer, I think, what's he got? What did he tell us? He has 5 schools, 6 schools, something like that?
He
he
has
owns?
4 public and I think 2 private schools.
Two private
yeah.
schools, yeah. So that's how, that was Chief Johnson coming to us and saying, we just think we would like to offer a presence in our schools. And the Baldwin Police Department did the same thing at that time. So that's a non-contracted, but very welcome, certainly to promote some safety. Just have a presence in the school, again, to build relationships, but also to just have a presence there in case there's any potential person who may be observing that school to see a police officer, perhaps parking the car there, checking in, but also be of service to that school if there's some need to the principal or to events that are taking place there.
and then my last remark would be, as, you know, looking at, talking about what the goal of this evaluation is. I would ask that if there is some recommendation to dismantle this, that we figure out, you know, what would you bring to the table as to what we're gonna do if we don't have SROs? What are we gonna do? Who's gonna do what they do? So I just kind of am guarded about that recommendation without thorough investigation and planning on if they aren't here, what are we gonna do? Because, you know, do we have enough security staff to cover what they do? And I think that's all my questions.
Can I just respond? I think to go back to the same, again, that's not our objective. Our objective is program evaluation, program review, weaknesses, strengths. And then if we see something in the data that we want to go dig deeper in, that then comes back to certainly superintendent's action team and then to the board. So, I mean, I don't think we should go into this intent that we're dismantling anything until we have thoroughly studied and gotten feedback from our stakeholders. So, and then I think we cross the bridge if we really see some data that's disturbing, we need to talk about that. But I think our intent is program enhancement, program improvement here as we get into this. That's really our goal.
Debbie, I just wanted to thank you for what you said about special education, making sure there's some good feedback there. I really do think we have a strong opportunity with focus groups, especially in this time of virtual and COVID. I think these can really work well. I think we could do a similar thing too with our students who come from the city in the VST program. So I appreciate that, and I think we should probably even think a little bit more about just making sure that we're touching all of the different groups and subsections of our Parkway community to make sure that we're getting a full picture. So,
And I think some of what you're noting there, or it's embedded in it, is use of a racial equity lens for the whole overall study, which is different than simply making sure that we include students, but it's also how we look at and interpret the data. So, and how we interpret what we learn and then use that to translate it into recommendations. So I think we just need to think and talk more about what that looks like and how it weaves throughout the entire study and isn't kind of relegated to the section on perceptions or, you know, perceptions of relationships. So I think just more consideration to be made there on how we do that well.
Okay, I'll jump in. I was part of the first meeting. I'll say I appreciated in the first meeting having the SRO there. I learned quite a bit about the program and even just some of the disconnect between different departments, comparing Parkway North to Parkway South. They don't communicate as SROs. So I think there's definitely value there having them as part of it. But to get back to kind of Pam's point, looking at an evaluation process, would it make sense to have them, have the SROs and the police departments wait until the September meeting to come in and be a part of it? And let me, correct me then too if I'm not following what your thoughts are here too. Having them wait until that September meeting to come back after the preliminary data comes in, and then get their feedback at that point. Does that make sense? Am I following your thought process too?
We can organize it however you want to do it. Honestly, that part of it, I mean, I don't know, but he's the researcher. I was more interested in this piece, making sure we got the right people who could help us identify, get us on the right track with the areas we need to be looking into. So we can sort of, with all due respect, we can uninvite them, from the future of it. I thought it enriched the conversation because I'm always learning more about, and we haven't said anything about our security department. I mean, there's a whole other world there that we need to not forget about, that we do want to look at in terms of their role as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I just add them too, since they're, I don't know if you need to list it right now, but who are the 20 that are on the planning team right now? You'll need to list it up, but maybe share at some point share that so we all know who's involved and what schools they're at and so forth.
Happy to do that,
I'm having a little bit of a hard time, and I'm not sure we can, well, I'm interested in if we can solve this, in everything being kind of perception. And I am like a qualitative researcher in my heart. So that is my favorite. And I also understand, the value of like quantitative when coupled with qualitative, and to not be able to like have those two things sit together, I think diminishes either of them. And so, I'm back on Pam's point and, brought up by Students for Progressive Change about the lack of data that I think perhaps exists on like the reality. And I'm not sure we need to wait for recommendations to start to address some of those things.
Good point. You're talking about the school to prison pipeline piece.
I'm talking about what interactions between SROs and students exist in Parkway schools, and how are those interactions tracked?
Honestly, right now, we would measure that via perception. I mean, right now,
Yeah.
that's all we got.
Yeah.
So now, could we do something where we have, observations? I mean, could we set up rubrics like that? Yes, we could, but then that's hard too, because if the SRO knows they're being observed, right? I mean, then are they going to be acting the way they always, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you run into that problem with teacher evaluations and all else, but we would certainly be open to any ideas, and we'd be open to further exploring ways to get at this measurement piece without relying on perception. But yeah, right now, that's what it would be.
Well, and we miss both positive and negative in that scenario. So like, school to prison pipeline is like our worst case scenario that we know is a reality for youth in our country, but we also know that there are positive things that are happening too. So I just, that grounded picture, I just think we need to think about how we don't rely solely, oh, my heart, on qualitative, to answer all our questions.
I'll just add, I totally respect Pam's comments. I'm wondering, though, how we can effectively evaluate the program if we don't get some type of input from the SROs at some point. I understand, maybe waiting until later, but it would seem as we're doing our due diligence on how the program's operating, we would want to know fairly early on how it's operating from their perspective. Because
I'm not saying to eliminate them from the process. I'm saying as part of the leadership team, that of course the SROs
Yeah.
need to be involved in the evaluation. They need to be asked from their perspective how things are going. but I'm referring to the leadership and the initial analysis.
Okay.
That's the piece that I'm questioning.
Yeah, the only thing is, and I'll repeat it, but again, it's your direction. I mean, the only thing we lose, it's a big thing that we lose, is if we don't have the SROs feeling like they have buy-in and that they're stakeholders in this process now, it's going to be real difficult for us to say, here's a bunch of recommendations we want you to follow through with. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I just don't know how bought in they're going to be to the process if we kind of keep them over to the side while we do all this and then say, here are the recommendations. I just worry about that. And that's why traditionally, in all of our past program evaluations, we've always included stakeholders who are most directly impacted by the results, the recommendations of the program evaluation. Obviously, we'll defer to you all on this, but I do worry about that as, you know, if what we want is improvement, I think by keeping them out, I think we're going to miss the boat on it.
Well, and you're not talking about having them run any aspect of this
No.
evaluation.
They
right?
haven't run any of it yet, and they won't. Yeah,
So
it's
when we
Paul's
talk-
the one, really. I mean, and I'm helping out obviously with the research piece of it.
So when we talk about the leadership, what part are we talking about here? In
Well, I think
the-
you guys are talking about the planning committee as being kind of a lead team, which I think it kind of is, because we got together and the idea was to bring to you, you know, main topics and guiding questions. You know, what that planning team's role will be in the future, again, Paul and I have talked about it, but we can defer again to you all and how you'd like us to approach it.
So is the concern, Pam, and that the SROs are on the program review planning team? Is that what is being referred to as the leadership of it?
That was my impression, that they are on the, yes.
So being on the planning team is what the opposition is,
Well,
where it says 20 participants?
there is a perception that this cannot be objective with their and there may be a misunderstanding of what the SRO's involvement is on this team, and I will admit that. But there is a perception that this cannot be an objective evaluation. If they are involved, I mean, it's really not even clear. Are they involved in April through June conduct program evaluation, develop preliminary findings?
Yeah,
It's completely, it's a little unclear, and perhaps we've misinterpreted that.
So the way we've originally established that planning team was to do what they've already done in this. The second thing was that they would be the group that met together to look at the data, the raw data, and develop main findings. This is how we've done it, how we've modeled this with past program evaluations. And then finally, Paul was going to, I mean, at least the idea, and again, we can change it, was to share with them before the report, you know, moved all the way to the end, was to share with them, here's what we're looking at doing with report, here's what we're looking at doing with the recommendations, things like that. So I would reiterate, and it's kind of too bad we don't have the list of the 17 or so on the planning, because it's really not a large, you know what I'm saying? Like, the police officers are not, it's not that many. I mean, I think 3 or 4
I can probably tell you
of
the
the,
names. Okay, so you know the 2 board members. We had 4 principals, Claymont, Northeast Middle, South High. Was it North High? Who was the other principal? North High.
Patrice.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
did you say something?
And, yeah, and then we had Mr. Pat McPartland, PNEA, Teacher Association. Student Services, Dr. Matheson was on it, and he identified Dr. Charlotte E.J. and Dr.
Wagner.
Greg Wagner. Director of Facilities, because Facilities deals day-to-day with our security department a lot. So we need that lens. And then Robbie Winkle, who's our supervisor of security. Officer White, and then Officer at the South High, what's the?
Weiss.
Lindsay Weiss, Officer Weiss, she's Manchester. And then Chesterfield was Captain Mike Thompson, and he supervises the whole program for Chesterfield Police. St. Louis County was the captain of the precinct in the which is the West County precinct? I forget the precincts mixed up. Central County precinct.
You got 13 Parkway people and 4 police employed, police agency employed.
And SROs, yeah, two SROs, and we talked about we just thought, well, get the 2 largest that provides the most SROs, so Portage County and Chesterfield.
And the other 3 that make up the committee are you, Nathan, and Dr. Marty?
Correct.
So
Yeah, and just real quick though, so like, equity is really, just like equality among participants is super important when we do this. So no one person had more of a say or less of a say during that session. Everyone had the same kind of say because it was just an opportunity to get feedback on what they thought the main topic and guiding questions should be. Now, obviously, Paul, as the leader, can do things. I mean, I'm sure he wordsmithed it, made it look, you know what I'm saying, pulled out some of the pieces. But,
Yeah,
but the actual planning team itself, everyone really could just offer their feedback. And that was
I will agree with that, and I assume, Matt, you might concur that, I mean, it was very evenly presented, and there was no, I didn't get the impression that anyone had any greater say. Everybody's comments were added to, each group, and it was kind of drilled down from there by the consensus of those groups. And I think there was only 1 out of 5 or 6 in my group, the breakout groups I'm talking about. There was only 1 SRO in there, and again, I didn't see that there was any I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but there wasn't any impact by one member of the group more than another.
And as I told them that night, I said, your role now is basically done until the fall. I said, we're going to go and meet with the board and get their feedback, and then we're going to conduct the review. So our intention was that they wouldn't be involved in conducting or developing the surveys or doing the surveys, that kind of thing. So,
And let's take it to the meeting in fall will be very similar. We're going to look at data. People will provide some feedback on what the recommendations might look at, and then SAT will take it from there and we'll take it to the board. This is putting a lot of eyes on the data and asking people to give their feedback who has been involved. So, I mean, that's just kind of the way we do things in Parkway, quite honestly, from Project Parkway to other things. I mean, it's a very collaborative process. We're wanting, more importantly, to get voices and feedback, and it's not about who's going to be the most. I mean, I'm trying to sit back and be a participant in those, as I know Jeff and Matt were, and I think that's the way and this is no different. So, again, it's an improvement process, and we're not trying to get influenced by anyone. We're trying mainly to get just a lot of opinions and voices and thoughts, so we can again make the necessary improvements and reinforce those good things that are going on.
And I think, for me, knowing all that and knowing the processes that you have in place that you have already gone through, in you hearing what we've shared with you tonight, our concerns about every possible lens that we can evaluate the program, I'm comfortable with it as you've presented going forward with it.
Can you just confirm the full data sets are publicly available? Will be publicly available?
wherever you normally do.
Yeah, so you're talking about in the report, right? Like just having the survey results just laid out? Yes. Plan to do that, and then with the focus groups, we plan to have either transcripts or summaries depending on personnel, and, it takes a lot longer to get transcripts
course.
versus summaries, so.
And in a way that
one or
can,
the other.
in a way that can be disaggregated by public as well?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds clear, it sounds like the board would like that. So
I think
we'll-
it's important.
Yes, so we'll do that.
So, please,
Yes.
thank you.
So how are the focus groups going to be decided? And, are we really able to tell the community that these voices will be heard and be active in the participation of the process?
Great question. We really do want as much feedback as possible. I mean, really, this is how we approach program evaluations in Parkway. We want like overload of data. So yeah, it's gonna be as much data as we can gather, and then it's gonna be transparent. So we want it to be that way, because I agree with you all. Like, it would be the biggest travesty ever for us to get to the end of this thing and have people say we don't trust it. You know what I'm saying? So we have a vested interest right now, making sure that we move forward with this and that everyone's going to believe the data that we gather and the main findings that we determine, and then the recommendations that we suggest.
So will the focus groups be in person, or will they be? maybe
Probably
survey?
There's surveys too, so it's not just focus.
focus groups and surveys.
And
Surveys for
right.
sure. Yeah, surveys will allow us to reach everyone.
Right.
Focus groups would be, not, I don't think they would be in person. I think we would do them virtually, just because of the
Right.
time.
Sure.
But we do plan to do surveys at some level
Yep.
and include everyone.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, parents, staff, students, at the very least. There might be other groups from that.
Yeah, the qualitative we're talking about really is focus groups, and I don't know how many we normally do, but we'll do some of those, but we do surveys, because that's where you can reach, a lot of folks. So, and then we'll gather secondary, research.
I will warn you, we typically include a comment section at the end, and so with these surveys, if we're sending them out to a lot of people, there's a lot of reading material there. So if you guys are super interested, I mean, you're gonna feel like there's too much data when you get this at the end, to be honest with you, so. Oh, and in full transparency, typically we do not include comments in the published version of the report, just because a lot of times people talk about specific people, specific incidents, things like that. So when we say we're including, we do extract the comments. Or remove the comments.
How do we handle that in focus group reports? Just,
We would typically either like blank it out, or we could also, typically at the beginning of a focus group, you kind of lay the ground rules. We could also say, please, stay away from naming specific people or specific
Identifiable.
incidents. Yes.
well, and I imagine if some of that starts to come up, it becomes a different conversation.
Exactly,
So-
yeah.
So how would you communicate with the community about this entire planning process?
I would leave that up to the communications chief.
So, because I think that's going to lend credibility.
I guess I would respond, we would do it like we do other program evaluations unless you tell us otherwise. I mean, normally, for example, if we're doing a science curriculum review, the communications department itself is not involved a whole lot. Because the target audiences that are being surveyed, we gather those email addresses and contact information from data management, and the surveys are just done. We help when we're asked to help typically, So-
We get these program evaluations, 2-3 times a year in different areas, and you guys always do a great job, so I'm not worried about.
I mean, and what I've seen is we don't have problems getting participation, in the research. In this one, obviously, we want to cast the net as broadly as you can, but not overwhelm yourself so much that you can't have good quality in the review.
To be fair, and Nathan's the expert here, but I mean, I also don't think we want to make this a program evaluation and not suddenly some bigger event whereby we start, promoting in the community. People should be, sending us information, right? I mean, we want this to be objective, right? We don't want to.
Well, it'll be objective regardless.
Yeah.
How we communicate it, that's totally up to us.
But I'm concerned that we start promoting this, and all of a sudden, it's not a program evaluation, it's about, do we have SROs or not? And that's not, again, otherwise, I think, we will get into an issue that we're not right now wanting. We want good, solid information about perception and people's experiences, and not start drawing the lines in the community. That's not what this is about. And so I think we handle it like Paul said, like all program evaluations. So it's fair and equitable, and it's again what we intend it to be.
Anyone have any further questions? Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You appreciate the conversation.
Next up, we have nothing. We have no special meeting, no closed session. The next anticipated closed session will be held on April 14th, 2021. Details of the closed session will be posted within 24 hours of the anticipated meeting. So now may I have a motion and a second to adjourn the regular meeting.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you all for attending and watching.